Okay, what are the pains that they are going through currently with regards to the aspect that you're trying to create offer for them, and what are the gains that they are looking for. And then from there, you can map the value map based on what are the product and services that can render the customer job done, what are the pain relievers that relieves the pains, and at the same time, what are the gain creators that your product or services or platform can create for the customer. So looking at the bigger picture, a business model canvas help you create value for your business, while value proposition canvas help you create value for your customer. So today we're going to focus our attention on environment map, which helps you to understand the context in which you create, right? So this is how the environment map look like. It is everything that surrounds your business model. So from here, you look on the right-hand side, there are market forces, there are industry forces, there are key trends, and there are macroeconomic forces. We'll deep dive in each one of them in detail afterwards, right? Okay. So this is what it looks like. So as I mentioned just now, in terms of market forces, you're looking at what are your market segments, what are the needs and demands of the market, what are the issues facing the market, are they switching costs for the market, and is it attractive to be in this market, right? Basically, you want to go into a market where there's money to be made, right? Constantly, repeatably, and scalably, right? And then you look at the industry forces. Here, we look at primarily industry players, right? So who are the supply and other value chain actors? Who are the stakeholders in the industry? Are they incumbent competitors? For example, I saw just now, hold on, give me a second. RFM, Raniza is creating terung asam jambu batu snacks. So who are the existing competitors that she is facing now, right? If she is an established business, who are the new entrants or insurgents, as we call it? And lastly, are there any substitute products and services? We'll go in more detail as we move forward afterwards. And then after looking at the market forces, we dictate the market analysis, and the industry forces, we look at the competitive analysis. Then we look at the foresight, something about looking into the future, which we look at in industry trends. So in industry trends, we want to look at regulatory trends. For example, if you're in a business that is involved in sugary stuff, right? Maybe you can see the country is heading towards a more healthier lifestyle. So the regulatory trends might mean that you need to adapt your recipe so that you don't use so much sugar, yet it is still tasty and delicious and desirable for your customer. You could also look at technology trends. Technology trends is something that's very big, especially with the boon of smartphones and all that, right? How does this trend impact and affect your business? Thirdly, are there societal and cultural trends? If you look at the global scene, right? More and more people are more nationalistic, for example. They are more proud of a product that comes from their own country, right? In US, for example, you know, they're like bringing business back to America from China and all that. So those are among some key trends. Other trends, as I mentioned earlier, maybe people are eating healthier. Maybe because of COVID-19, people are considering work-life balance. So these are societal and cultural trends. Lastly, on key trends, there are also socio-economic trends. These are a more macro level, which we will look at afterwards, right? In terms of macroeconomic forces, there are global market conditions. For example, people look at the oil prices going down and tensions, trade tensions between US and China, right? There's the capital market factors. Is it easy to get capital? Because in business, if you expand, more often than not, you probably will have to source for capital either through banks or through the government or through new players like crowdfunding or P2P platforms. Thirdly, how's the economic infrastructure like? You look at in Sarawak, for example, the internet connection, the road access, maybe the supply chain in terms of logistics. So this is something for you to consider if you want to deliver your products and services. And lastly, commodity and other resources. Of course, with market condition earlier, I cited the oil prices being very, I think, unstable now. It's going up and down, depending on the, I guess, the situation with COVID and what's happening in the Middle East and countries that are supplying oil, oil and gas. Sorry. So these are macroeconomic forces. So let's have a look at the video, just to give a snapshot of what is this environment map all about, right?
Remember the chaos your idea faced before you made the canvas? Well, you've tamed some of it by mapping the elements that are mostly within your control. But the world out there is full of threats, constraints, and opportunities beyond your control. They create the environment in which you'll design and build your business model, and in which your business will fight for survival every day. Just because you can't control these factors doesn't mean you can't and shouldn't account for them in your model. Doing so will help prepare your model for threats, ready it for changing legal constraints, and prime it to jump on innovations. Let's see how mapping the environment will affect the Boomer travel agency model. On the right, you'll map market forces, everything related to the customer segments you've selected. Ask yourself, which other segments are there? Which ones are the most lucrative? Looks like Beth's discovered a segment of boomers with a range of disposable wealth. You could ask, which segments are growing and what do they most want? And why might your customers resist? Okay, good. Boomers have trouble adapting to new technology. Now above your canvas, map key trends. Are new technologies about to undercut your value proposition or supercharge it? What regulations are coming up? How is society at large shifting? Right, Carl, rising medical costs could weigh heavily on your customers. Now to the left, map industry forces. Who are your main competitors? What advantages do their business models provide? Could they crush you? Your industry may already have a dominant competitor, but ask yourself, where are their weaknesses? Can you disrupt them? What might happen as suppliers and partners evolve or don't? Better to know now that the travel field is crowded and volatile, right, Carl? Finally, below your canvas, map macroeconomic forces. How is the global economy doing? Markets may be in a state of rampant uncertainty. How available is capital? Venture capitalists may be taking few risks. How well is the infrastructure developed in the market you are doing business in? Sure, many boomers are experiencing a decline in living standards. Now you've mapped your environment, full of threats, opportunities, and constraints. What do? Use the map, of course, to make your business model more responsive. Looking at industry forces on the left side of your canvas, ask, does your model have a competitive edge today? Tomorrow? Good thinking, Beth. That dominant competitor could be a threat. Looking at key trends on the top of your canvas, ask, is your model prepared for emerging trends? Okay, if rising medical costs encourage overseas treatment, that could be an opportunity for your travel agency. On the right for market forces, is your model in line with evolving customer needs? Sure, if your customers are resistant to the internet, you're right to rethink delivery through a website. And below for macroeconomic forces, how will your model adjust to macroeconomic shifts? Yes, Beth. Unfortunately, travel is becoming a luxury that a growing number of your customers can't afford. But don't be overwhelmed by these elements. Asking and answering these questions will help make your business model better suited to its environment and that much more likely to succeed. Now you're ready to start testing your model in the real world.
All right. So that's a little bit of introduction on the environment map. So what I'm hoping we can do today is have some discussion so that we can actually take this big concept and try to ground it into something that we can actually apply and help us to build our business. Because the fact is, I think once you go into the market, right, it's not so much, I mean, there's one way of engaging one-on-one customer and looking at, people at that level of maybe 20 people or 50 people. But in order for your business to grow, you have to look at the entire market. And I think it will be we need a different approach to understand these forces, which asks us to look at the grander scale, at the greater scheme of things. How is it like, right? So let's look at market forces to start with. The first force, which Dick, as the video presentation said just now, relates a lot to the customer segment, right? So the first market forces that we're going to look at today is there issue in the market, right? Normally people say that when there's a problem, there's an opportunity. So for businesses, we want to tap on those opportunities, right? For example, an issue might be the product does not exist in your market, right? So if you look at the trend, boba tea, maybe two years ago or 3 years ago, it's something that's quite popular all around the world. So, some businesses that came in, but Chatime and Tea Life actually capture that opportunity, right? Over time, they evolve to localize it. They know Malaysian not just like boba, they're like Holic, they're like, Milo and all that. So they tailored their product to meet the issues that's available in the market. And then you have issues about health as well. So they start to pivot and add some health element by boosting your drinks and all that, right? So identifying market issues focuses on identifying key issues driving and transforming your market from the customer and offer perspective. So here are some questions that you should ask yourself when thinking about market issues. The questions are, what are the crucial issues affecting the customer landscape? Which shifts are underway? What's happening now that will change something in, say, 3 years or 5 years down the road, right? One of the things that people normally land on is technology, obviously, but there are other shifts as well. And where is the market heading? Where is the consumer heading? If you look at Malaysia, right, or Sarawak, for example, there is a growing population of middle class. So where would the middle class market be heading? For example, once you have more middle class people, there will be more lifestyle diseases, people with diabetes, people with high blood pressure and all that. So if your product can anticipate that, then you are preparing your business for the future. You can ask yourself, where is the, for Dennis, for example, in the construction industry, right? Where is the market heading? Is the market looking at saving costs, or is the market looking for more green solution, right? So that's something for you to analyze. So for the benefit of today's exercise, I've actually connected all the examples around the healthcare industry. Yesterday, we looked at the date night between two couples, right? So they were looking at a very granular level, at a customer level. So today I've chosen the pharmaceutical industry as an example for us to understand how this environment map is being applied. So for the pharmaceutical industry, if they look at the market issue, the healthcare cost is rising. So that's one issue, right? There's also a good trend where it's shifting more from treatment to prevention. That means people are going to the gym, people are getting healthy eating habit, people are getting tested through labs and all that, and which I think relates to the third point, which is treatment, diagnostic devices and support services are converging. That means that you go to a medical center, it has everything. So that's one of the trends that's happening in the pharmaceutical industry. And then lastly, emerging markets are becoming more important. I think at the global scale, before this, they were like serving mature market like Australia, Europe, or the United States and Canada. So now they see that because of the rising middle class in the emerging markets like Indonesia, Brazil, Russia, maybe parts of Africa. So pharmaceutical industries are shifting their attention to this market as well, because that's where I guess the green lane, green zones are, right? Next, we look at the market segment, right? So other than looking at the issue, you can look at the trends and you can analyze the segment itself. Which segments are most attractive, right? Can you seek new segment for your product? So some of the main questions that you can ask here are, what are the most important customer segment? So More often, especially when I'm dealing with people who are in F&B business, they tend to say everyone's their customer. But if you look at closely, there's this law called the Pareto law. More often than not, 80% of your customer actually share the same demographic, share the same geography, and share the same attitude, right? So try and observe closer, right? Who are these people actually? Are they family, right? Are they older citizens, or are they single young professionals, for example? And secondly, among these market segments, which one have the biggest growth potential? Which ones are declining? And which one are small, but actually if you pay attention to it, you can activate them. So coming back to our pharmaceutical industry landscape, so the customer segment that they're looking at could be doctors and healthcare providers. They can look at government and regulators, because you see that sometimes the government, there's government hospitals, they set policies and all that. So maybe it's worth for businesses to consider government and regulators as part of their customer segment or market segment. You can also look at distributors, because when you're selling, it doesn't mean that you're at the downstream. Sometimes you're somewhere midstream or upstream, right? They can also look at patients. And then, as I mentioned earlier, with market segment, pharmaceutical industries are looking at emerging markets. However, the mature markets still remain the main market for pharma companies. Next, with market forces, you can also consider needs and demand. So this one outlines the market needs and analyze how they can be served. So you ask yourself these questions. What do your customers need? Where are the biggest unsatisfied customer need? What do customers really want to get done? And where is demand increasing and declining? Again, we're looking at the larger level. We're not looking at individual customer, but take a step back. If I were looking at 1,000 people as my customer, how would they shift and move, right? So coming back to the pharmaceutical industry, in terms of need and demand, the demand is strong, and there's dispersed need for niche treatments. I mean that some people are maybe looking for Ayurvedic, there's a name for it. I kind of lost me now, of people looking for traditional remedies, right? So they could be one of the treatments, right? Number two, in terms of need, there is a need to manage the exploding cost of healthcare. That means that this is an opportunity for companies with, like in insurance, for example, or people in the creating new medicines that are at lower cost, unlike large companies which charge very high because they own the patent and they basically have the monopoly on the medicines or treatment that they offer. Next, there is a large unsatisfied healthcare needs in emerging market and developing country. So there is a need, right? Meaning that in some healthcare, some emerging market like Indonesia, I do not know about now, but many years ago, they like to send people to Malaysia because the quality of healthcare that they have in the country was not as good or as widespread as we have in Malaysia, thankfully, right? Maybe it's focused in Jakarta or the major cities, but people in Pontianak or in Kalimantan, they will look at alternatives by going to Bangkok or going to Kuching or Kuala Lumpur or Singapore. And another need and demand is nowadays the consumers are better informed. That means that, with the internet, with applications, with information, super highways and all that, customers are better informed, and they rather than the doctor just telling them take this, they need to understand what are the options available. They know to get secondary opinion and all that, right? Okay. Another market forces is switching costs for customer, right? So this relates to switching from your business to other businesses or from other business to your business, right? What binds customers to a company and its offer? What switching costs prevent customers from defecting to competitors? is it easy for customer to find and purchase similar offers, right? And how important is brand? Sometimes there is brand loyalty. So for somebody to switch, for example, from an Android phone to Apple or from Apple to Android, there is that consideration. Okay, for coming back to the pharmaceutical industry, example of the switching costs, monopoly on patent protected drugs. That means that pharmaceutical company invest a lot of money to come up with solutions and treatments. So once, hold on, let me just reply. I don't understand why people are like bothered about the value proposition when we are like having a lecture now. Okay. So coming back to, sorry about that, guys. It's just otherwise it's quite okay. Switching costs, right? So there's low switching costs for patent expired drugs, which now is replaceable with generic drugs. Some drugs are cheaper because the patent has expired. I think they have the rights for maybe 20 years or 30 years or 50 years or 60 years. So when the patent expires, that means that any companies can replicate and create similar products, right? Then there's a growing amount of quality information available online. So that affects switching costs as well. And there are deals with government and large-scale healthcare providers, which increases switching costs. That means that sometimes if you are, if the government purchases it and subsidize it, so there's no reason or very little reason for people to switch to options that are more expensive. Okay, this is the last one. When looking at market forces, is it attractive? That's actually a very good question. If you are in fashion and retail, for example, I see at least one or two of you who are involved in creating Borneo-inspired fashion with the tribal or Iban or Bidayu or Orang Ulu patterns and all that. So you ask yourself, which customer segment are you targeting? Are you targeting the expatriates? Are you targeting the upper middle income local population, right? So ask yourself, is it something that customer willing to pay? Is the margin there, right? Can customer find and purchase cheaper products and services? Okay, coming back to our pharmaceutical industry, in terms of revenue attractiveness, high margin on patent protected drugs, similar to earlier, but basically this still falls under market forces. So they're quite similar in analysis, right? Low margins on generic drugs because it's open, everybody, because once there's more supply, normally, I mean, it's naturally the margins will be suppressed. So there's low margin on generic drugs. Healthcare providers and government enjoy growing influences on prices. So the government can dictate. For example, if we see with COVID-19, right, with the mask, the government can say, you must charge $1.50 or you must charge $1, right, or you must charge 80 cents. So there is influence in the government in the healthcare sector, maybe less in the business that you're involved in, right? And lastly, patients continue to have little influence over price. So that's one of the negative aspects of the pharmaceutical industry. You have the government, you have large companies, you have companies producing, manufacturing, producing generic drugs, but normally the patient have little say. If you have high blood pressure, if that is the cost of the product, and if it's a patented product, then you will have to pay a premium. If it's generic drugs, then a lot less, right? So that's the nature of the industry. So any questions so far on market forces? Anything relating to your business, for example? Maybe I'll ask a question, right? Maybe Norazita Salini, I think she's there, right? So what are the market forces affecting your business, right? In terms of customer segment, where are the high growth potential customer? Or what are the trends like, right? During COVID-19, for example? Who are buying your product today, right? Or suddenly emerging in the market? So any question on market forces, guys? So market forces relates to the customer segment and its external forces. So some market forces are opportunities, some are threats, right? So if you look at the SWOT analysis, I think some of you are familiar with SWOT analysis. These are external factors. So there can be either opportunity or threats. So in a nutshell, that would make it simpler for everyone to understand the environment map. No questions? I hope that you see the importance of understanding the market, right? Because in my experience, it may not be so apparent when you're starting, but you want to go into the market with a lot of potential, right? That means that it doesn't stop with you making 5,000 ringgit a month or 10,000 ringgit a month. The market is so big that you can expand and there's room for you to grow. So that's something that maybe you can take away from the market forces. If there's no question, I'll proceed, yeah? Okay, or any opinion for that matter, you can just post it on chat. Maybe when from time to time I can pause and respond to it, right? So after looking at market forces, which focuses more on the, hold on, what's my opinion on the MICE market? Anything related to tourism is hard hit by COVID-19, right? So I think if you look at the market forces, now if you are in that space, people are looking at domestic tourism, domestic investment, and domestic business. So for businesses that are already in, then the alternative is to pivot. You can pivot in many ways. You can do online conferences and all that, or you can focus more on local market. So that's a very good question, actually, Elevate. Tourism industry is one of the hardest hit, if not the hardest hit, because of COVID-19. Okay. I hope I answered your question, but thank you for the question. Now we look at industry forces. Industry forces relate to everything all the other forces relating to your industries. We can look at them as stakeholders, right? So one of the industry forces that's very important for business, again, these are external. When we're looking at the environment map, these are external factors, right? So the biggest one is competitors. You need to study your competitor. You have to know your competitors, and more often, sometimes when we have pitching competition or we have activities with universities, right? Many people focus on developing ideas, developing the business model, but they have not go out and understand who they are competing against, right? So key thing to ask here is, who are your competitors? Who are the dominant players in your sector? What strength do they have? What weaknesses do they have? So that's something that I think would add value to you as a business operator, right? What are their main offers? Then from then also, you know that, is there a gap in what they're offering? Or is it something that the customer cannot live without and you have to offer as well, right? In business, there's always what we call the point of parity and point of differentiation. Point of parity means that you have to match the offer. Point of differentiation is, this is something that's special about you. And then you can also look at which customer segment they are focusing. But the list of questions, you can always go back to the business model canvas. You can also ask what channels they're using, what are their customer relationships like, what are the key resources. So the questions here are just trigger questions, right? Looking at the pharma industry, in terms of industry forces, most people, when they want to go into pharma industry, even the oil and gas sector, right? Most of them, they are not small or micro players. They will probably be between large and medium size. So these large and medium sized companies compete against each other. Another challenge that's facing the competitor is there's not a lot of new product or new innovation. While they invest a lot in R&D, there's not a lot of output in terms of commercialization of their R&D activities. Again, because the market is so competitive, so the way for them to achieve growth, achieve better economy of scale is through merger and acquisition. The other trends that competitors are doing is because they could not develop internal capabilities, what they're doing is they're buying other businesses that have potential with new treatments or drugs, right? And this does not just happen with pharmaceutical industry, it also happens in technology. You hear a lot of time stories like Facebook buying WhatsApp or Facebook buying Instagram, right? So for them, because it's a highly competitive market and it's very hard to innovate, so one way the big companies stay ahead of the game is by buying small businesses, but that also presents opportunity if you are in the pharmaceutical industry and you're a small player and you happen to have the potential to come up with new solutions. So being acquired by a large company could be a strategy for your business. Another trend is several players in the pharmaceutical industries are having an open innovation process where they invite others to come in and do a hackathon to come up with solutions relating to maybe information management system, or when it comes to customer service and all that. When in fact, for example, my company was recently invited to conduct a hackathon for one of the, I think the largest biomedical company in the world. And they're also adopting an open innovation concept where they invite startups and all that to come up with solutions relating to healthcare services between doctors and patients. Other than competitors, if you are an incumbent, if you are somebody that's already existing in the market, you should also look at new entrants. The thing about business is very dynamic, and that's something that I think is exciting about being an entrepreneur, is there's always new players, new businesses, new startups coming in and disrupting the market, right? So you need to identify, are there new players coming into the market, right? So who are these new entrants? How are they different than what you're offering? What are their advantages and strengths and weaknesses? What barriers would they must overcome in order to grow their business? Sometimes for new entrants, they lack the understanding of the market, they lack capital, or they lack existing customer base, and you may have advantage there. And next is, what are their value proposition? Again, these questions are not exhaustive. You can always refer back to Business Model Canvas and do a side-by-side benchmarking or comparison between your business and your competitor or new entrants. So for pharmaceutical industry, it's quite good that they don't have that many new entrants, because as mentioned, it is a high-cost business. Just like oil and gas industry, for businesses to come in, they have to invest a lot in certification, in manpower, in machineries. So with pharmaceutical industry, there's little disruption. Maybe you have companies like Roche, like GlaxoSmith, like Novartis, and a few others. So they basically dominate the market, right? In the oil and gas industry, they have this term called the Seven Sisters. These are like Shell, ExxonMobil, British Petroleum, and others, right? Caltex and all that. So main new entrants are generic drug companies, particularly from India. If anything, they're not the patented drug. The new entrants mostly come from once the patent expires, and innovative companies in India go big in manufacturing low cost, affordable medicines for the wider consumers. Next, we look at substitute product and services. So when it comes to industry forces, substitute are not your direct competitors, but businesses that offer similar value proposition to what you are offering. A very good example is, if we go back to the example that I shared yesterday about a couple who wants to spend time with each other, might go to a health spa or like a spa treatment, right? So the substitute product could be going to the cinema. The substitute product could be going on a picnic. The substitute product could be just having lunch or dinner together, right? So they give the same amount of satisfaction, but on a different market altogether. So for example, if your product, you're in retail and people buy product because they want to look pretty and all that. So your alternative could be people who goes and buy, rather than buying clothes, they might buy beauty products, for example, right? Or they might even go to the gym rather than buying clothes, for example. So these are substitute to your products and services, right? Which product and services could replace ours? How much do they cost compared to us? For example, people looking to have a good time with their family. Some people might opt to travel. Before COVID, people will travel to Australia or Singapore, go to a theme park, right? So the substitute product might be just going out to have shell out or something, right? So these are what we mean by substitute product and services. How much do they cost? Obviously, traveling will be more expensive than just going around within your city, right? How easy is it for your customer to switch to the substitutes, right? So you want to look at making sure that your offer is attractive enough so that you don't switch, right? Whether in terms of time, in terms of money, or in terms of how hard is it to perform it, right? So for the pharmaceutical industry, prevention is an example of substitution to treatment. That means that people who are eating healthier, are doing the exercises, are maintaining good mental health, these are substitute to treatments, right? So they are a threat actually to the healthcare industry. Sounds very evil, huh? But I think the market is as such, right? Patent expired drugs replaced by low-cost generics. So these are also substitutes and alternatives. Other industry forces are suppliers and other value chain actors. So you need to know who are the key suppliers in your industry. Are you totally dependent on them? Are there other potential replacement coming down the horizon, right? And which one gives you the best margin? So this is quite important to assess actually. So in business, I would advise you not to depend so much on one supplier. You may think that, we are friends, or because we have this relationship, it's like a partnership, but you have to really look at it. Is it really a partnership, or are they also offering the same services to other people and it's not exclusive, right? So examples in the pharma industry are research contractors, biotech firms, specialty drugs developers, doctors and healthcare providers, insurance companies. Bioinformatics is growing in importance. These are companies that does data in terms of tracking, for example, glucose level or blood level using technology, and as well as laboratories. And lastly, with industry forces, there are also stakeholders. Stakeholders are people who are not directly involved, but they have an interest in your business. So this could be your workers are your stakeholders. For example, if pilot, right? If there's not enough pilot out there, so that's something industry force that may affect your business. If the government is unstable, that may also affect your business. Are people lobbying, for example? For example, some large companies, they may lobby through means, through communications and all that, that may go for or against your business. So example of stakeholders, shareholders, who focuses more on financial gains. So that can be detriment to innovation and all that. You have the government and regulators who, whatever they say is the law and has to be followed by the industry players. Lobbyists, social enterprise group, foundation, who has agenda in such as low-cost treatment for developing countries, and scientists, right, who are also stakeholders, just like workers, who are the core talent in drug manufacturing industry. So let's have a look and pause for a bit if there are any questions. Okay, I have a question from Amalina here. boleh tak if a startup, say, just consider small scale market issues, then improve from time to time? Is it okay or too risky as a startup? I think you can look at small scale market issue, but it depends on the market size that you're looking at. As a business, normally we want to look at what is the market share that we're looking at, right? And that can be as easy as how much revenue do you want to make. So for me, it's important to challenge yourself and not set the bar too low, because sometimes many businesses, I think they have so much potential, but they do not fulfill that potential because at the end of the day, they want work-life balance or they're scared of investing. There are many businesses that they like to see money in the bank account rather than reinvesting in their business. So it's a very good question, Amalina. You can look at small-scale market issue. By small-scale market issue, it can be localized, for example. What are the issues in Kuching? If I may ask, Amalina, what business are you in now? While we wait for F&B and ice cream, right? So in terms of market forces, I think one thing that you can consider is there is a growing middle class in Kuching. If you are based in Kuching, I'm assuming, I'm sorry if I'm wrong, or other market forces is there are more young people thanks to the mushrooming of higher learning institutions and all that. So those are example of market forces. In terms of industry forces with your F&B ice cream business, you may look at supplies, right? Are you getting a good price that allow you to get better margin? Are there alternative suppliers for you out there? Next question is who are the competitors that currently exist? I know there's a famous one, ice cream gula apung if you're in Kuching, right? So that's quite popular. At the same time, there's McDonald's as well. So how is yours better or different or more or desirable to certain market compared to the others, right? Okay, so that's one. I have another question from Hisham, my friend Hisham. Netflix successfully overcome Blockbuster. Now they change from DVD to streaming superpower. What should iFlix do to be on par or better? I think there's one story that Netflix did was they changed the market, right? So they were the pioneer. So before this, Blockbuster is very much a rental business. So what Netflix did was they changed the business model to subscription, where there's no limit, right? Basically, you pay for the account, you can exchange. I can't remember whether it's 5 DVDs at a time, and then they shifted to streaming, but they maintain that you can watch as many as you can. So if you're asking about iFlix, I think they are going against a very strong incumbent, right? We look at the incumbent just now when it comes to industry forces. So for iFlix, it depends on the strategy actually. If they want to sort of dominate just the local market, then maybe local content that Netflix does not have. But here again, the real challenge with incumbent is they have the capital resources, meaning that if iFlix want to get local content, Netflix can go and do it as well. So there's no simple answer to that. They have to be creative and appeal to what the customer segment want, right? There's brand loyalty as well. Many people subliminally actually prefer larger brands, right? They go to Starbucks compared to Coffee Bean. They go to Netflix compared to iFlix. There are some advantages of having a strong brand as well. Okay, let me answer Crystal Chong, Asong Vincian question. After nominating a niche market, how can we expand into adjacent market? I think the key here is, it depends on the business that you're in, Crystal. I'm not sure what business you are in, but I think the key thing is to just go out there and learn about the market. So the key thing is to go out and pilot your solution to the adjacent market. That means that if you are catering, for example, to younger generation, you're with Moses, all right. If you're tackling a younger group, for example, the natural adjacent market is maybe family, right? That means that there are young families as well. So you're already appealing to a young market. So maybe going to the adjacent market is by trying to introduce, for example, children's wear, right? Or maternity wear. So those are adjacent market that's quite close to your existing market, right? But maybe it will take time, and at the same time, it may go against if your brand is very much appealing to the younger crowd. So maybe, as we talked about yesterday, and I mentioned again today, maybe the idea is to have like a house of brands rather than the branded house. So maybe Edabaran something, right? Edabaran Pro. I do not know. I'm just giving an example out loud there. All right, but expanding to adjacent market is just like going into a new market. That's the key thing. That means that you have to build, measure, and learn. There's no one way. Like a very good quote that I mentioned yesterday as well is the same as what Mike Tyson said. Everybody has a plan until they get hit on the face. So the only best way is to go and test the market. But the key thing is to fail early so you can succeed sooner. So don't be afraid of failure. Failure is just, for me, R&D cost, right? So set aside a budget. Set aside a budget for marketing, set aside a budget for you to develop your product and all the logistics related to it. Go and hit the market and see whether it resonates and decide whether you want to pivot or drop it altogether, right? Okay, let's move on. I'll go to key trends. Key trends are dealing with things relating to what will happen in the future. So key trends, one of the most common one is technology. What are the major technology trends both inside and outside your market? Technology doesn't always just mean digital and phones and all that. It can be new machineries. Nowadays you have IoT or new machineries that makes you more efficient, right? Very recently, actually last week, we had a class dealing with F&B businesses. So we had clients who are doing kebab, for example, right? The old way is for people to slice and get the meat out and put them in a shawarma and all that. So there are actually simple technology that actually help them cut that time by 20 seconds. Huh? So things like that is something for you to consider, makes you faster, makes you more efficient, makes you able to generate more money for every minute or every hour in your business. And some technology also come in as an opportunity and threats. For example, if other people are using a smart system, right, and you're not, so it is a threat for you because maybe other people are more consistent, other people are faster, or other people are able to be meeting the customer need better than what you currently have. And then you also want to consider technology trends that customers are adopting, right? For example, for some businesses, like AR and or VR, right? Something that some customers are adopting, but not everybody. So you consider, is it something that is attractive for you to go in, or it's something is important for you to watch out, right? And maybe consider in the future. Okay, with pharma industry, technology, all this pharma genomics, gene sequencing, right? Personalized medicine because of gene sequencing, major advances in diagnostics. Apple Watch Series 6, I don't know if you followed it. They now have the blood oxygen monitor, right? So sensors are improving and they will change the healthcare industry. Use of pervasive computing and nanotechnology for injection and delivery of drugs. So this is also something that may happen in the next 5 or 10 years, right? Or become mainstream in 5 to 10 years. And then another regulatory trends. Sometimes you can look at other countries like Singapore or US or Europe, right? We look at for example, the Sustainable Development Goals, for example. So those are some trends in terms of regulatory, which influences the government's decision in setting up rules and laws and policies. For example, pharma industry are getting more and more similar, right? Many countries, for example, they want to control the sales of drugs. So marketing directly, I think companies need to have offices that the government can actually regulate and control in such countries. And then they also pressure for drug companies to be more transparent. Okay. There are societal trends as well. Let's look, because of time, I think let's have a look at directly what are the examples. There is a negative image among society in terms of big drug makers. They are seen as greedy, profit tearing from people's health and all that, right? There's growing trends of consumer being more health conscious. And then there's also this interest in businesses and products that are sensitive to the environment. Right? If you look at Apple, it's a very good example. Apple now reduces their packaging. It's getting smaller and smaller and with less item each time. So these are something that actually from maybe the traditional old school customer see it as like, not what they want, but more and more, especially the younger generation, are more sensitive to all these green issues, Black Lives Matters and all that, right? And customers are now better informed about what the companies are doing. So many businesses nowadays, they try to behave in a more responsible manner, because anything that goes contradictory to that may adversely affect their sales and the loyalty of the customer as well. Socioeconomic trends. These are major trends in terms of demographics. Where are they shifting? Right? I mean, I don't like to use this example, but they are, I think for me, it's not a healthy trend where people are like buying based on racial lines or religious lines. So those are quite negative, I think. And joining them may gain you short term, but in long term, I think people will correct themselves and it can be negatively impacting your business, right? I can look at whether people are earning more, and now we look at people losing jobs, for example. So those are socio-economic trends that you may want to consider, right? You may lose some customer because people have less disposable income to spend, right? Example of pharma industry, aging society in many mature markets. Malaysia also, we're getting largely aging, people are living longer, right? They say like eventually people living 100 years old will not be uncommon. Good but costly healthcare infrastructure in mature market, growing middle class in emerging market, large unsatisfied healthcare needs in developing countries. This good example that I shared earlier was Indonesia and maybe Burma or Cambodia, Laos and Cambodia, right? So this may present opportunity for us to do medical tourism, or for our existing businesses in the healthcare industry to open hospitals and medical centers in their countries. Okay. We'll do this very quickly. Macroeconomic forces deals with the macro data. So the key questions that you can ask is, how's the economy, right? I know not many of you pay too much attention. I'm not assuming, but maybe some of you do, some of you don't, to what is the country's budget. I always advise entrepreneurs going to our program, pay attention to the country's budget. Then you can see what are the opportunity, what are the market will gonna look like in the coming 1 year. Then you can make informed decision on your business. As I mentioned earlier, how high is the unemployment rate? There are data saying that we may have as many as 1 million people unemployed by end of the year. That's quite a lot considering we have about, I think maybe 10 to 14 million people who are employed. So 1 million represents quite a high number. In the pharma industry, example of macroeconomic forces, global forces are global recession, negative growth in certain countries, slower growth in India and China, and the uncertainty as to how long the recovery will take, right? So people are saying as well, come October, once the loan moratorium is ending, then what would happen, right? Would people start to default on their loans? Would people have less money to spend, right? What kind of things will happen to the market, right? Next, capital market in business. At the moment, maybe it applies to some of you. Is it easy for you to get capital, right? In the beginning, it's easy because you can ask, you can have your own money, the founder's money, the family money, or the friend's money, maybe some government grants early on. But as you grow, you will require more capital. So it's for businesses to understand, is it easy for me to get capital? If I were to expand, where can the capital be sourced from, right? And how costly will the funds be? So pharma industry, tight capital market, um, um, there's not much venture capital available, risk capital availability extremely limited. So these are just examples. They probably write, but just to illustrate how people look at the capital market. Next, commodity also. If some of your businesses involve sourcing for ingredients and all that, if it's from other countries, maybe relating back to the market conditions because of the maybe low value of ringgit, then it may affect your pricing. And lastly is the economic infrastructure. How good is the public infrastructure in your market, right? If you're doing apps, for example, a technology, and you're focusing in Kuching or in Sarawak, right? How's the internet connection like? How's the road like? How's the supporting system like, or the business landscape like in your particular area? You can also look at individual and corporate taxes. Some businesses, they opt to register in other countries because in some context, doing business in Malaysia can be quite expensive. For example, in Malaysia, all businesses are being taxed, whereas in some countries, you have to generate at least $1 million before you start to be taxed. So in Malaysia, it can be a little bit expensive, right? But maybe in terms of other costs like rental, utilities, other services, it can pull the price down compared to other countries. So with pharma industry here, it's specific region to region in terms of the infrastructure, economic infrastructure. So this is the assignment for this week. There's just one question. So consider about how your business model might evolve in light of the changing environment in terms of market forces, industry forces, key trends, and macroeconomic forces. So in the exercise later on in the PowerPoint or in the Google slide, just mention what are the market forces and how is it changing you? What are the industry forces? How is it affecting your business? What are the key trends upcoming in terms of technology, society that are changing, that is impacting your business? How would your business respond to that? And what are the macroeconomic forces? Currently, the macroeconomic forces could be high unemployment, could be low consumer confidence, meaning that people are keeping their money in their wallet rather than spending. And then from there, update your business model canvas. So let's take some questions, guys. Any question on a business environment or the exercise that you will do, or you are struggling to see how this is relevant to your current situation, for example? Okay, I got a question from Lee Yon King, Mr. King. I think it is possibly many large companies, they're quite open to working with new businesses. It's just that I think you always consider what's your point of entry. Some point of entry, I think it's still about relationship. It's about knowing, maybe as mentioned earlier, the three buyers chain, the three buyer chain. One is people who have influence in the company. Maybe if you get to contact the CEO from LinkedIn, or you go to conferences. When I was starting up, conferences are a great way for me to make friends or make connection, or at least get them to know me so that they can pass me down to whoever the managers or head of departments or vice presidents are. So that's one part. And I agree with you. It's very good for the market as well to gain confidence if they see somebody has already used your services or product. If you look at in some businesses, other than looking at partnerships, what they do is they even work with influencers and all that to establish themselves. So it is one way to increase trust, right? The other way to increase trust is by being selected in programs like Shell LiveWIRE or Magic Global Accelerator Program. So by going through those programs, when you are talking to maybe seed funders or angel investors, they see that you have commitments and you do have some guidance before this, that at least there's a baseline of what they have an indication of who they are working with, right? So I hope I'll answer your question there, Lee. It is possible. I think the key thing is to be brave. One tip that we'll share when we do the webinar on managing teams, in every startups, right? I would always recommend you have 3 types of people in your startup. Number one is you must always have a hustler, somebody who's like gonna talk their way out of things, who's like gonna find a way to get things solved, right? Those hustlers are very important for every business. Number 2 is you want to have your hipster, somebody who knows how to do marketing, how the society are, how the market segment are. So they would probably normally work with marketing your product or doing business development. And thirdly is to have what we call the hacker, right? Somebody who knows the technology. So when the hustler and the hipster go and sell your product, there's somebody at the back who can actually build it, right? It's not just talk, but you can actually deliver on what you tell your customer, right? Maybe we'll take one more question. I hope none of you have fallen asleep. I know it was a bit long today compared to the first 3 modules, but I have to cover them all, right? Any question, guys? Maybe last question?
So can I ask one question?
Oh, no.
How do you know if the trend is like going to a right trend? Is like first Apple and Samsung, right? And then Nokia did not follow the trend and Nokia just died out from the market and everything.
Very, very good question. I think with Nokia, the idea was they were comfortable. That's actually a very good lesson, because sometimes when you're ahead, you think you're the best, right? Or you think that you have done a lot of right choices, so whatever choice you make in the future will be right as well, right? So they fail to listen to the customer. It's the same thing with Kodak as well, right? Very popular case, right? They actually have they actually created the digital camera in their labs, right? But because they had like a huge share on the film camera, they choose not to proceed with it, right? So in the end, what happened? They got killed. So because of these 2 lessons, BlackBerry as well, one of them, right? People say that it's better for you to kill your product rather than other people kill your product. At least if you kill your product, you're still ahead, right? Apple did this very well, I guess, Ken. I think, they actually almost killed their computer business, right? Because they were the leader in computer business, or number 2 in the computer business, right? What they did was they killed that by creating a new business which generates most of the revenue now, right? Which is not just iPhone, but also the App Store, right? That's how they make money. Once you buy the phone, it is like buying a Gillette, You buy the Gillette handle, you have to change the Gillette blade all the time. So once you have the phone, you have to update it, you have to get new software and applications, and they get money from every transactions on the sales of the apps. So that's why it's very important to listen, right? To listen to individual customer, but also listen to the broader market, right? That's why people in stock market, right? I don't play stock myself, but what they do is they always look at what are the trends, what are happening in Middle East, what's happening politically, right? Recently, one politician in Malaysia said that he's going to be prime minister, right? So what happened that day, right? The market crashed, right? Because the market likes stability. So when there's lack of stability, what happened is they would probably take the money elsewhere, or take it now before it drops further, right? Cut the losses, right? So let's look at 2 more questions. Sorry, guys. I hope I answered your question now.
Yeah, thanks. Sir.
All right. So will the US election outcome affect the Malaysian economy in general? Definitely, right? If you look at Donald Trump, for example, because he takes a very aggressive nature with China, right? Because of the trade tension, the global economy sort of like had some shock, right? Whatever the outcome to the US election will affect Malaysia. Why? Because US is actually one of our largest trading partner, right? I think along with China, maybe Singapore, right? So Malaysia is a small country, and small countries normally depend a lot on trade. Like Indonesia, for example, if you're an entrepreneur, right? You go into Indonesia, you can either be very rich very fast, or nobody accept your product. But just staying in Indonesia can make you quite a rich person, right? Whereas in Malaysia, depends on the product, right? If you're doing consumer goods and all that, our population is still relatively small, right? So Malaysian businesses, if they grow, they need to go outside. They need to go to China. They need to go to Singapore. They need to go, Indonesia even, right? Okay. So, okay, I got a question here from Tay. Sorry, it's a private question, but maybe I answer because some are joining, maybe miss the first week of class and all that, right? So you have any questions, you have my number on WhatsApp, on the group. You can WhatsApp me personally if you have any issue on the any part, not just activities, or even just clarification on design thinking, clarification on business model, value proposition canvas, or environment map. If you want to come to my office, yes, you can set an appointment. If you are in KL, I am based in KL. My office is at Menara CIMB KL Central, if you are in KL, right? But next week, actually tomorrow until Wednesday, I will be in Penang. So we travel a lot because we are a training company, right? But I'm more than happy to welcome you if I'm in town, right? Okay. So with that, before we leave, I know we extended a bit of time today. I hope you can have a look at this. Let me just post it on chat, but we'll post it on the major group as well. Let me just get the link, so that everyone can in the meeting can give us feedback. I appreciate the feedback, guys, because we've done LiveWIRE for many years now, and it's always been very community driven, right? Norizita, you were there before, right? Eddie, you were there, right? What we do is normally it's easier to interact when you're in person. I'm a lot more friendlier than I look online, trust me, right? But we want to keep the same spirit as well with this. I know maybe some are a bit shy to comment negatively and all that. I appreciate one of you who said that the lighting is not so good. So I hope today the lighting is better. But obviously it would be better if it was in my office. At home, I'm limited unless I do renovation on my house because it's a weekend, right? And many buildings on weekends, they actually switch off the aircon. So this is the link to everyone. Please help me fill up some feedback on the business environment module today. Or if you enjoy it, I would appreciate the feedback as well. If you feel that there's something that you want, or maybe the class is too short and all that, we can note it as well, right? But it was just to share a little bit. Our class is over, but it took us a while to find a formula on how we can deliver LiveWIRE. Shell is quite a unique company. It's a large company where they are very careful with the health and safety of everyone involved in the Shell stakeholder family ecosystem, right? So that's why, although many businesses have started conducting business classes online, physically and all that, Shell is still practicing safety first, right? As they always do, right? So that's why we are doing this online. Please bear with whatever gaps or differences, but we'll try to make the best of it, right? Okay. So thank you with that, guys. Thank you so much. Anything like I said, you can WhatsApp me, you can WhatsApp Amina, right? You can WhatsApp the group. We'll try to respond. But if it's a technical question, please shoot them to me, right? So that I can respond, right? Okay. Or otherwise, Amanina will push back to me and I will reply in the group as well. Okay, guys. With that, thank you so much. Have a good weekend.